Millions of home and commercial security alarm systems are installed nationwide today to deter theft and reduce burglaries. Police and local law enforcement authorities respond to over 30 million alarm activations every year. But about 95% of those alarms turn out to be false. False alarm calls cost law officers precious time, and they cost taxpayers money. Every year, false alarm dispatches cost taxpayers over $600 million.
We in the law enforcement community have encouraged through our crime prevention efforts over the last 25 years for businesses and residences to install alarms. The net effect has been a dramatic increase in the number of alarm installations across the country, and in turn, an increase in the demands that police respond to those alarms. We must clearly manage that response.
As sales of home and commercial security systems continue to rise in all communities, it's even more essential that law enforcement organizations address the false alarm issue.
I believe that alarms themselves are a deterrent to crime. I have witnessed firsthand the importance of these alarm systems. If we have them to where they are working properly, that adds to the benefit of making sure that when there is an alarm, it's a valid alarm, and we in law enforcement are responding, and we're responding with the resources necessary.
The Private Sector Liaison Committee of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the National Sheriff's Association are dedicated to working together on problems of concern to both public law enforcement and private security personnel. Police and alarm industry members of this committee have been working together since 1992 to minimize false alarms and reduce unnecessary police dispatches.
I have witnessed in the last 5 to 10 years a very dramatic change in the attitudes of law enforcement and the alarm industries. And in fact, the leadership of law enforcement and the alarm industry are now working very closely together to develop model policies and standards that will benefit all of the citizens.
IACP studies show that 80% of false alarms are triggered by only 20% of alarm users, and that the most common source of false alarm activation is user error. The primary offenders include churches, schools, banks, and municipal buildings. The PSLC has adopted a model ordinance that can reduce false dispatches. The alarm industry's National Burglar and Fire Alarm Association and law enforcement's False Alarm Reduction Association jointly developed this ordinance. It outlines a series of best practices to effect dispatch reduction programs. When properly implemented and enforced, this ordinance yields up to 60% fewer false dispatches. 7 key components of the model ordinance include registration of alarm systems, telephone verification of each alarm signal by the monitoring center, graduated fine structures for false alarms, suspension of police response for the worst offenders, an appeal process for reinstatement after an offender's false alarm problem is rectified, enforcement. The best ordinance will not be effective unless it is vigorously enforced. And lastly, a recent strategy that has been endorsed jointly by the IACP, the NSA, and the alarm industry is multiple call verification. Under this approach, the central station is required to reach out to a second or third party to determine the actual need for police response. This new approach has proven so effective that departments can expect up to an additional 50% reduction of false alarm dispatches. Cities such as Spokane, Bridgeport, Phoenix, and Charlotte, for example, have seen false alarm rates drop significantly after adopting a version of the model ordinance tailored to their circumstances.
Several jurisdictions have used creative alternatives to manage the false alarm problem. One, for example, has outsourced the management of the false alarm problem to a private company. Others have utilized a cost recovery model where the costs of the responding police officer are charged to the alarm user and then in turn used to reimburse or underwrite the cost of the police department itself. Another one has offered alarm users a choice of a police response or a response by a non-sworn guard service. But if the police department does respond, the alarm user is charged the cost of the officer's time. There is, however, another emerging alternative called verified response. And in verified response, a third party is required to determine or confirm that a break-in has occurred before the police will respond.
When implementing a model ordinance, a city may outsource its administration to improve effectiveness and productivity without adding additional costs or personnel.
The outsourcing itself, there's a tracking and building component of the alarm program. We need to keep up with the registrations, for example. We require a registration. The outsource company maintains the files on the registrations. The end user, when they make that application, it's sent directly to the outsource company. It's something that we pay them to do through the program. I think one of the benefits in that is allowing us to stick to the knitting. We're law enforcement officers and we know how to do that. That's our mission. In outsourcing itself, we saw that as a means of taking that component and outsourcing it to somebody that's their business. They do those things. They administer the program for us.
In some cities, like Phoenix, law enforcement agencies have recovered their costs that they use to resource additional patrol staff.
That entire part of the police department, the alarm unit, is funded by fees that are generated through the $15 annual alarm permit that is required from anyone who has an alarm in the city. That generates over an $800,000 revenue to us that covers those administrative costs, salary, benefits, mailings, all kinds of other brochure kinds of information that we put out to the public. In the final analysis, on an annual basis, only about 12% of the people who have alarms in their residences or businesses here in the city are ones who are assessed. So we've got almost a 90% compliance rate, if you will, and that gives us a higher confidence level when we're rolling on an alarm call. That there's really a good reason for us to be doing this. We could have not done this in many ways without the cooperation and the partnership from the folks in the alarm industry.
With Toronto's cost recovery model, consumers have a choice between city police and non-sworn private responders. Steve Reeser, Deputy Chief of Police in Toronto, cites that under this program, the department experienced a dramatic 60% reduction of false alarm dispatches. Additionally, it yielded enough revenue to maintain a larger patrol complement than otherwise would have been possible. In December 2000, Salt Lake City adopted a verified response program. Salt Lake City Police will no longer respond to a residential or commercial burglar alarm without an eyewitness verification that a break-in or crime has been committed at that location.
The program in Salt Lake has operated successfully for the last 2 years. Verified response represents a very dramatic shift from the historic response that police have given to false alarms. If a chief is going to consider verified response, we urge that they very carefully weigh the other available alternatives, properly educate their community why those other alternatives will not work, and work closely with the alarm and security industries to ensure that viable alternatives are put in place to the absence of police response.
The IACP's Private Sector Liaison Committee recommends it review and utilize the non-sworn responder guidelines as a baseline for qualifying private security personnel. Citizens install alarm systems to protect their property, families, and to provide peace of mind for themselves.
Since May of 1996, when we started this program, looking at the numbers we have today, the 114,000 registered sites, 92% of that number has never had a billable fine.
Cities like Phoenix and Charlotte are success stories. They have experienced more than a 300% increase in installed alarm systems. Nevertheless, they continue to reduce the number of false alarms each year. With the number of installed alarm systems on the rise, law enforcement organizations must proactively manage the false alarm issue. There is no one solution that fits every city. Therefore, it is critical that each department analyze its own situation and examine the full range of alternatives. It's also essential that the departments partner with the citizens of the community as well as the alarm industry to conserve resources and best serve the community. For more information, please visit the websites of the IACP, Private Sector Liaison Committee, the National Sheriff's Association, and the Security Industry Alarm Coalition.